Thanks for that. I'm going to move on, if that's acceptable, to question 17. Are there any other issues that have not been covered above that people would like to raise?
Sorry, Niall Tipping from Grosvenor. Just really a couple of observations. Just wondering whether you'd be amenable to including more policy support for landholders who are seeking to help Westminster advance their public realm improvements agenda and who are committed to investing significant sums in delivering improvements to the public realm. I'm thinking particularly of offsets in relation to future development projects. It would be nice to see some policy recognition of that. And then secondly, more an observation on a management point of view, that in terms of actual delivery of these schemes, would encourage the council to, I suppose, speed up its decision-making processes.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Here.
I think this is placed to more generally Simon Burke at Knightsbridge Association and Campaign for Clean Air in London. I think rather than just limiting the point I just made previously to traffic reduction, I think there is a important general point here which isn't specifically covered in earlier, in terms of just getting the balance right in the city between residents, visitors and workers. The residents, speaking as part of an amenity society but working closely with many others, the residents throughout central London and K&C, I know them there as well, feel very embattled, and people again who are accessing the city, yes, they should be encouraged to access and so on, but to suffer hours of inconvenience as a resident, and compared to 1 or 2 minutes of inconvenience for someone who might have a slightly longer traffic route driving, clearly there needs to be a balance there for the person who is really suffering, and it's not the person who's got a 1 or 2 minute delay because they're kept on an arterial road rather than going through residential areas. There should be priority given to keeping traffic out of residence areas and onto arterial roads, which is the position in the current UDP, but it doesn't seem to have been followed, would be my observation, getting back to John's point about linking up with policy and implementation.
Thank you.
Julian Robinson, London School of Economics. I think a very important part of the public realm is actually street trees. They provide shading, some air filtering, and completely change the nature of a street. And I'm thinking around the streets around the LSE in terms of Kingsway and Aldwych. And as soon as you come off of Aldwych onto the Strand, the nature of that street completely changes. And I think they have a sort of softening effect and are actually very important to people's perception of the city. And I would have thought there should be sort of definite policies directed at trying to increase the number of street trees in terms of biodiversity and for all sorts of different reasons.
I'm certainly aware that the council has been looking at producing a tree strategy, which is something that's running alongside this, obviously, and I think one of the main aims of that is the right tree in the right place. So it is certainly something the council is looking at, and it's also something we can look at through this process as well. Gentleman in the green.
Robert O'Dell, Soho Society. Getting back to pedestrian priority, quality of pavements would be something else. It's rather surprising to me that in the centre of the city, 5 minutes off Piccadilly Circus, tarmac pavements that are uneven and are almost standard. Something better than that should be done.
Thank you. Gentleman at the front.
Pascal Bates, Victoria Interchange.
Well, I think, Johnson, I think the council...
sorry. The gentleman here just started, sorry.
With regard to the point being made, I think it was by Simon Burkett a few minutes ago, about residents feeling under siege in central London, not just in this borough but in others. This is a problem, and one of the difficulties for Westminster, I would suggest, in developing policy is that you're in a position of responsibility without power, to the extent that the ability to put things right is in large measure in TfL's hands rather than yours. It's something I touched on speaking about pedestrians earlier. You can't compel TfL to do what you want, but if you can develop policies and working groups with them on the critical issues that affect Westminster, so as to rebalance in favour of Westminster's businesses and residents and visitors, and away from what appears very often to be the TfL dominant feature, which is let's keep traffic moving at all costs, regardless of the effect on the immediate locale, then you would deserve a big vote of thanks from local residents.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Zammit.
Well, I think that the balance has to be looked at. I think the car was king for too long in Westminster, and pedestrians should have more priority in schemes, as I've touched on. And even now, the major schemes which cost the most money be centred in the major centres, which benefit visitors and tourists, not so much residents of Westminster. But some schemes have addressed pedestrian better facilities, but Praed Street I've mentioned, and Harrow Road I think had better junction points. But just come to think of it, Circus Road, it really didn't do anything for pedestrians there. It just paved it nicely. Didn't have crossovers at the junction points, and I think they should look at that. And I can think of lots of roads where we might not widen them, but they should have the junction should be more pedestrian friendly, and probably a whole strategy of how did we come about all these one-way streets that used to be two-way, and other traffic diversional routes. Probably we've got to go back and look at the drawing board and ask the residents and local councillors what they think, and amenity groups, and go more, fundamental review instead of just churning out the money every year. I think the trouble is when you expand a scheme to make it friendly, it's more expensive, and therefore another scheme that you were going to repave a street drops off the thing. And perhaps we're not investing enough in our infrastructure, in the money we commit to it, let alone the grants we get from TfL, which are more difficult. But maybe we should be investing more. When you cross a road in Bayswater Road, the car can get over the humps and bumps, but the crossing points, the traffic lights are in poor condition all along there. So I think we've got to have more emphasis to residents and